Hello, my name is Julien. This is my final presentation on climate engineering technologies, and I'll be talking about urban greening. So, urban greening is essentially the incorporations of plants and water into urban environments to increase biodiversity and a community involvement with urban environmental projects. And it used to be just considered like, adding small patches of trees and grass on sidewalks and having small public parks, but now it's more of adding additional plant installations on and around structures like green roofs and green walls. So, as you can see on the first slide here, we have some plants growing off of this wall here, and expanded nature trails within cities. So, a good example would be the walk through the gulch in Eureka. For this project, I want to focus on the urban green space projects in Hangzhou, China. Hangzhou is a major city located on the eastern coast of China. These projects are being funded by the Chinese government since the early 1980s. China has had a conservation plan for the city of Hangzhou to essentially bring back its lost green space. But in the past 30 or so years, we've seen um, more of an initiative in actually bringing back these green spaces. So, some examples of projects include tearing down dilapidated factories to build parks, green space built next to dilapidated canals, along railways, roads, and as well as tree planting. Later, some parks actually have more plants than human facilities, like uh, chairs and benches and whatnot, to allow more plants to grow. Though this is preferred by professionals over public participants, this is found in a study by Hu et al. In 2022. So this is a citywide initiative. Um, and the Chinese government also has nationwide initiatives to increase its biodiversity, but specifically we'll be focusing on Hongshu for this project. Um, as far as my research goes, I saw that this had a very positive effect on the residents. However, in a review paper I read by Walsh et al. From 2014, they did point out that um, the placement of parks in richer versus poorer areas, aka gentrification, um, has an effect on how much the people enjoy the parks and the utility that they get out of it. Also, there are parks that are in very close proximity to roadways, so that increases air pollution in the parks, which we will come back to later about the pitfalls of this plan. Using public funds and taxes, urban greening can actually be very economically viable. In the case of Hongshu, using taxes has been incredibly successful in putting money aside to do these urban greening projects. In a 2006 study, Chen et al. Went out and surveyed people around Hongshu of different residential ownership status, gender, income level, age, and education level. And actually found that people were very interested in conservation and wanted to see the greenery return to Hongshu and were willing to pay with their taxes to put this money aside. And that the value of the conservation program in 2006 was a little over 15 million. So this is actually a very small piece of the pie in comparison to all of the money that's being spent on city operations. And I think that this could be expanded to cities outside of just China. This could be seen in American cities if we didn't gentrify all of our parks and put them only where rich people are. As this is an ongoing project, the urban greenery spaces being added to Hongshu are incredibly feasible, technically speaking. The projects involve tearing down old buildings to add new green spaces, as well as adding green spaces along railway lines and roadways, which are all incredibly accessible for machinery. It also costs money to build parks and to do these kind of restoration projects. However, with a plan already in place that is being actively implemented to build more parks, it's incredibly feasible. Hongshu is actually quite a unique case study for urban green spaces because Hongshu is known as the Garden City and is also known for its West Lake, which is a vast lake that is known for the conservation that happened on it and its like silkworms and stuff. So the Urban Green Space Initiative is actually very popular within Hongshu because of how nurtured the environment is, or how they want to bring it back to its original state. And it's sponsored by the Chinese government and also local ordinances as well. Um, there are some quality differences between parks in poor and rich areas, which was pointed out as gentrification in Wolch et al. And but this issue is actually exasperated in American parks because of the differences between Chinese and American political and economic dynamics and internally. Also, the fact that American parks have a more anthropocentric framework for building the parks, wherein the parks are less for conservation and more for human leisure. And this was also pointed out by Hu et al. In 2022. The two main risks that continued to come up in the literature were one, that gentrification was possible because um, parks that had better amenities and better resources were preferred to put in richer areas than poor areas. And also, the other was that there was an issue with air pollution because putting parks and green spaces on the side of roadways and railway lines um, leads to more pollution in those parks. And there's concern with the quality of air that people are breathing in those parks because even though it's a green space, that doesn't always mitigate the amount of emissions that are coming from the infrastructure near the parks. So these are concerns that actively need to be addressed, and these were like the main ones that came up for me. In conclusion, I actually learned quite a lot about urban greening through reading about Hongshu, China, and their urban green spaces projects. I think there's a lot that can be learned about, taking dilapidated buildings and infrastructure and turning it into a more green environment to increase biodiversity because here in America, at least, we have so many buildings that are just falling apart and infrastructure that hasn't been used in 50 years, and it's just sitting there, and we're not doing anything with it. And um, not that I care about the property value per se, but the property value is just dropping on it. And instead of doing something productive with it, like planting community gardens and you know giving the land back to the ecosystem, if that makes sense, we are just letting it rot. And I think we could actually, take some lessons from Hongshu and generally how China goes about its urban conservation. I think some of the issues with this are, of course, gentrification. However, this issue is more exacerbated in America because of our political dynamics and how um, racism and economic disparity works in this country versus in China. Um, but I think if we, it requires a pivot away from anthropocentrism into more of a um, ecology based mindset and thought process about how we humans live, which is a lot to ask for. But I feel like if we pivot our mindset to focus more on ecology and on the betterment of both people and the environment, that projects like urban greening can actually be incredibly successful. And it just takes a large group effort and, more importantly, awareness about the projects and clear communication and very meticulous planning so that this can be successful.